My name is Chris Kroll, and a couple months ago I started this group, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so thank you all for coming back. The mission of our organization is, our group is for families with advanced learner or gifted children who live in or attend school in Loudoun County. And we support the next generation of innovators and problem solvers by educating parents on how best to address the special needs of their children. So this is what we do. Our next speaker is Dr. Deep Sran, founder of Loudoun School for the Gifted. And Deep is going to talk to us tonight about developing a work ethic in gifted children.
I founded Loudoun School for the Gifted with two basic ideas in mind. Our motto is do great things. I believe that gifted children are the ones who are most likely to do great things because of their capacity to do great things. Their ideas are bigger, their aspirations are bigger. As somebody who's a gifted student his whole life, though, I think you start with one big challenge, however, and that is your work ethic. Because if you're gifted, as I'll show you, by definition, you do things better with less work in school. So grade level peers are going to have to work harder than you. And as I talk, that's a dangerous lesson to learn. And now what do you do about it? Now, one of the central themes, and I think Krishna touched on it with his question, is everything we're talking about is something we want kids to do. And we know that if it's really important, we can't make them do it. We want them to be autonomous about it. We want them to do it on their own. Now that's the rub. You know, you can't make them work hard. So how can we create conditions under which they will work hard? So, number one, the Pew Research Center does a study with each generation since World War II. Then the boomers, Gen X, millennials, and they found that millennials were the first generation that don't mention work ethic as a defining characteristic. It's just not something they use to talk about themselves. And I don't think that that surprises anyone. You know, anybody who works with young people, the one thing they seem to lack is work ethic. It drives us crazy. When you lose your hair, it drives you crazy. Maybe that's why I lost my hair, working with young people. But what's great about them, though, is they're pretty honest. They're not hiding it. 3/4 of them said older people do have a better work ethic. I'm just going to grab my bottle of water. Now, my students, though, have a little bit of a twist. They say old people work harder because they know what they want to do. I don't know what I want to do yet, so I don't work hard yet. That's a great thing about kids, right? They mess with your head. But it's a funny thing, right? I mean, we work hard because somebody strokes a check. In school, what's their incentive? A letter grade? A number? I mean, I know I always talk about, you know, being the son of Asian parents, but we did a debrief, all of my gifted friends, after we left science and technology school, and we met up, and we were doctors, lawyers, PhDs across the board. And the thing that drove us was we didn't want to disappoint our parents. It's a very funny thing. It's a strange thing to motivate you, but I don't think my parents knew that. It's just they created certain conditions. So just remember what the students say, though. They don't know yet what they want to work hard at. Maybe there's some truth to that. Number two, this is the point I start off with. Given the same work, academically gifted students will outperform grade level peers. Schools teach a very dangerous lesson. You can get by. I used to study for AP Calculus while watching television. So I would study for AP Calculus exams starting at 9:30 p.m. the day before the exam while watching television. I would fail the exam. So senior year, my grade was D, first quarter, E, second quarter, E, final grade, and E for the semester. And if you just change it, it's my name, Deep. And so I changed the E a little bit, showed it to my parent, and you know whose fault it was? I remember distinctly. Whose fault was it?
The teacher's fault.
The teacher's fault. Absolutely. It had nothing to, I'd always done well. I'd never seen below 95th percentile on anything. It had to be the teacher's fault. And so, only looking back, I learned that it's a funny thing to have this head start. You learn a very dangerous lesson. And so, It's even worse to tell gifted kids they're smart. So Carol Dweck's research is pretty compelling. She did an intervention with 5th graders. She took a large group of 5th graders, randomly divided them in half, gave them a test, and then sat down with each group. Only one intervention. She said one sentence. One group heard, "You must be smart at this." That's the entity theory of intelligence. The other group heard, "You must have worked really hard." That's the incremental theory. America tends to be an entity theory country. Asian countries tend to be incremental theory countries. When you look at interviews with Asian teachers, they'll be asked by American researchers, "Who's your smartest student?" The teacher will say, "What do you mean, the person who works hardest?" No, the one who's smartest. "You mean the one who works?" There's this. And so subsequently they asked the kids, "Do you want to take an easier test or a harder test?" The entity theory group said easier test because they wanted to show they were still smart. The incremental group said, "I'll take the harder test." After they did poorly, the incremental group worked harder to figure out why. By the end of the test, in every measure, the incremental theory group outperformed. The only intervention was one sentence. Now, when you're a gifted student, you hear a lot, "You're pretty smart. You're 95th percentile. You're 99th percentile. You're profoundly gifted." And so what Dweck found is emphasizing effort gives a child a variable they can control. You can work more or less hard. Emphasizing natural intelligence takes it out of the child's control, and it provides no good recipe for responding to a failure. When I showed my students this, one of the students who is profoundly gifted, and I looked at his PSAT scores, they're all 99th percentile, he said, "But can't you know that you're smart and work hard? These kids are smart." Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And so we're going to get back to takeaways, but you know, these kids, they're looking for the loopholes. Wait a second, what about? Did you think about? Third, privilege has its costs. My parents worked 40 to 60 hours while going to college. In the US, they came here, and my dad always told me this story. He would drive by Georgetown University and they would tell each other, "This is where the privileged kids go." So the lesson he learned was, I'm not going to have my son work at all. He's not going to work through college. He's not going to work through law school. I went to Georgetown, ironically enough, for law school. And I wonder if it was the wrong lesson. The value of hardship and struggle. Children in affluent areas, Loudoun County, parents of gifted, it's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. They lose an opportunity to learn the value of hard work. I taught in a charter school. Every student in that school knew if they don't work hard, they're going to be scrubbing the brass on the elevator threshold like their parents. What my kids know in Loudoun County is that 2,500 square foot basement is waiting for them after college, after law school, after that master in ed, after the PhD, after the postdoctorate. That 2,500 with the big screen, it's waiting for them. Parents who do too much for their children may teach them to do less. Now, this is a funny thing about Asian parents. If you have an Asian parent or grandparent and you sit still long enough, there's going to be cut fruit in front of you. No matter what age you are, whatever you're doing, cut fruit will appear. I administered the AP Chinese exam at our school, and the Chinese mothers, it was like headphones were going on and computer was getting set up, and it's almost like a pit crew. You have your own live genetic pit crew. Anything that it's all done. My dad taught me a different lesson. If by 6:30 on Saturday morning, no matter what I did in high school on a Friday night, I was not out digging ditches, my mom would say, "Your dad's been up for 2 hours. What are you doing sleeping at 6:30 on a Saturday morning?" Sometimes I wonder when I look at my students and this gets left here and they'll walk away, and I'll talk to their parents, I'll say, and they say they do the same thing at home. Now the parent's thinking, that's okay. And I'm thinking, what? You let them get away with it? So I sometimes wonder, you know, parents have they have their right interests in mind. They're trying to do the best. Oh, my child has so much homework, I'm going to help out. There's so much stress, there's so much, and I wonder, so, you know, maybe if we had them do everything, we would create the conditions where they expect that they could do everything. Because the one thing I know is, Churchill's one of my favorite people. He had this quote, never, never, never quit, right? We all know that ultimately your child's success will depend on how hard they work, how they push against people saying you can't do it. No, we won't give you money for it. No, it's a bad idea. It's never been done before. It's when they push through that. So how do we create the conditions? Based on what I've said so far, what would you think? Just based on these observations, what are your thoughts on what's it going to take to create the conditions under which your child stops at nothing? If they have a goal to do great things, that they stop at nothing to see it through. And so that's why our motto is do great things. As I said at the outset, there are these two dimensions of it. One, do you have the imagination, the creativity, the wattage to even imagine something new, right? The kind of outlier mentality. But what you find is, I always listen to these NPR reports. What you find is the poets and the artists, they also go through 100 iterations of something. They also go through, the Steve Jobs biography is a great example of how many times you keep whittling away. The term is polished stones in places like Taiwan and Japan. You're always, and so this is why I do think there's this dualism. There's the old school work ethic, which the rest of the world does pretty well. And then there's this new school, do what you value. Steve Jobs' line, put a dent in the universe, which is what we're really great at in the US. And so US educators go to Asia to see how do you get the math scores up. And Asian educators come, how do you vent the iPod? Right? So, so I'm trying to balance the two, but you're exactly right. But what would you say, how would you, just focusing on that one dimension, what would you say with the strong work ethic?
So what I talk to my kids a lot about dig deep.
Right.
Lots of conversations about what it means to dig deep.
And so the literature now uses the term grit. Grit, and I was just watching True Grit last night. This idea of, getting past whatever hardship you face. And so I'm just going to close off before I get the one, and then I'll take the question and answer. Each child's different. Is the one thing that is universal. Here are my observations. Number one, be less helpful. And this is one thing I've noticed as a teacher now for 20 years. The more you do for them, the less they do for themselves. And this is really hard because you want to save them. You want to help them. Number two, communicate and maintain high expectations. This is the most important thing parents can do. And this is what I remember talking to my peers. We didn't want to disappoint our parents because their expectations were so high. Number three, promote an incremental theory of intelligence. Hard work as the source of success. I'm not actually all that afraid of telling your kids they're smart. They're smart, they're smart. The one thing kids, you got to be honest with kids. But at the same time, again, the other side of the coin is ultimately it's hard work that you can control, and that's the variable that you should invest in. And then this is the most difficult one. Help your child find or create meaningful challenges in which they can only succeed. So there's a book called Flow, Optimal Happiness. The leading researcher on happiness is this guy, Csikszentmihalyi. It's a very difficult name. But he found that greatest happiness comes when you are working very hard on very difficult goals that are within reach. And so that is kind of the thing when it comes to acceleration, or it comes to finding the optimal level of challenge for students who otherwise are not working hard. A lot of that is going to fall, as some of the earlier folks said, on you to really find the thing, but you can't make them do it. It has to be something that they are interested in. So it'll take a lot of experimentation. But Flow is really great because it talks about how you ultimately have to push yourself, but never beyond what's reasonable, because you don't want to set up the anxiety and so on. Okay.
This is brilliant.
And I have yet to read the biography of somebody who's made a dent in the universe where their parents were doing it for them. In fact, they often had an oppositional relationship with their parents. So thank you very much. Your patience has been amazing. Just the final thought, I'm sorry, Chris.